which is A, you see how far the maximum is from the midline, and so that's just 1 from 3 to 4, and so that's just 1 times cosine, but you don't have to write that, it doesn't really matter. And so there are 2 equations that you can write depending on where you start, and we'll talk about the other one later. We'll just start with the first one. So the first thing you want to do, or the second thing besides the midline, is find the maximum, which would be at 0, 1, and since we already covered the vertical shift, which is the amplitude in the midline, the last thing we have to do is the horizontal shift. And so instead of starting at 0 on the x-axis, it starts right here at 3 pi over 2 in the middle of pi and 2 pi. So that's 3 pi over 2. So the vertical shift, or horizontal shift, is going right 3 pi over 2. And so you got to remember that the signs within the parentheses mean the opposite. So negative means go right, and positive means to go left. So since we're going right, it would be negative 3 pi over 2. And then the last thing you do for this equation is find the period. So to find the period, you can find 2 points. So we'll pick the maximums. And so we can see by looking at the graph that 2 of these lines is equal to 1 pi, because you go 1, 2, that's pi. So we'll start right here. You go 1, 2, that's 1 pi, 1, 2, 2 pi, 1, 2, 3 pi, 1, 2, 4 pi. So from here to here, that's 4 pi, which is the period. And so to find what we multiply to x, we do 2 pi over, we'll just say b, which is what's multiplying by x, equals 4 pi. So 2 pi is the parent function's period, and right here is the period of this graph, and then b is what multiplies to x in the equation. So then we just solve for b. So you multiply by b times b. So 2 pi equals 4 pi times b. Then we can divide by 4 pi, divide by 4 pi. And then these pi's, they cancel out. 2 over 4 simplifies to 1/2. So b equals 1/2. And so that becomes 1/2 times x. Or we just simplify that a little bit. It's f of x equals cosine quantity x over 2 minus 3 pi over 2 plus 3. And don't forget that 1/2 times x is equal to x over 2. It's the same thing. And so there's your first equation. And then there's also one more equation that you could do. So, so for this one, we started at the maximum right here, but it could also be starting at the minimum if you, so it normally goes max, mid, min, mid, and so on. But if we start at the minimum, that would mean that it's a negative cosine. And so to find that, you do f of x equals, and the amplitude is the same. The only difference is where you're starting the equation at. So it's negative cosine. Period is the same because it's still 4 pi right here. So x over 2. And then the difference is the h. And so instead of going right 3 pi, just start at the max, because we're starting at the min instead of the max because it's a negative cosine. So to start at the minimum, you'd be going right here. You'd be going left pi over 2. So it would be x over 2 plus, because we're going to the left, pi over 2. And the midline is still the same. So it's plus 3. And there's that equation. So you got to know how to do both of these because the final exam will be multiple choice. And so either of these would be a right answer. So just make sure you know how to start at the maximum and how to start at the minimum, which all you have to do is multiply the trigonometric function by -1 or negative whatever the a is, and then change the h to whatever the shift is to get to that minimum. And there you go.